First of all, to start out tonight, last week I had told you, excuse me, it's bothering me. I had told you that I wasn't sure how many more units we're going to have. We are going to have two. By the time I got done with Unit 8 here, it was relatively straightforward and simplistic. We'll cover it today. And so I hope to cover Unit 9 next week, November 30th. That will be the last unit. There will be a project, there will be a Lab 9. There are now two new labs up here, or not labs, but chapter projects. 31 is an overview of this multi-activities. It's good to read to kind of reinforce what I'm doing in class today. 32 has a hands-on project to do something similar to what we're doing in class today. Get you a little experience with it. 33 goes a little further than what I'm doing in class, so it's good for you to see that just to experiment and know that it exists, but it's not something we're going to be covering in class. And this morning I did post Lab 8, so let's take a quick look at that. Lab 8 basically takes your Lab 7 and expands it. Right now, your Lab 7, once you click on somebody's birthday or on somebody's Christmas list, a toast message pops up and tells you the details about that. What you're going to be doing in Lab 8 is having a second screen show up that allows somebody to edit that data. And so if we have a Christmas list and Green's set at maximum price of $75 and we decide we're going to bump it up to $100, we can edit it, come back to the list, and it should show that way if you're showing the $100 as part of it, but the record should update. I'm a little concerned about that for something I'll show you today that bothers me just a little bit, so we'll have to take a quick look at that and see how it goes. Try to come up with a different scheme. But what I do want you to do is display all of that data not in text views, but in edit text or radio buttons or date pickers, whatever is appropriate. Right? Not just text views. So I don't want you to just throw up one text view, here's your details, because you can't change it. I do want you to be able to change it. Second activity should display the icon as well. So if you wanted to change the icon, instead of getting green technology, we want to buy clothes for Christmas instead, you should be able to change the icon for that and have it stick at least while the program is running. Right now, all of your Unit 7 programs load their data from a hardwired, a hard-coded array. That's perfectly fine for right now. In Unit 9, if everything goes according to plan, which so far I'm doing okay this class. It's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. If everything goes according to plan, we might be able to write this data to an XML file and read it from an XML file. The reading, for sure, if we have time, we'll try to write it so that you can replace old data with new and use an XML file as kind of a pseudo database. And then you can read further into the book on how to use the mini MySQLs to SQLite to do databases in Android, but we won't get that far in class. So we should be able to change the icon. Nothing will be permanent. The second activity should include a save button that saves the changes. Return to the main activity, which then displays those, updates the list view to display those changes. If you want a little extra credit to make this a real valuable application, those input fields should all do validation. You've proven to me, most of you, proven to me that you can do validation. You know how to apply it. I'll give you extra credit here if you apply it to this project. 1 point per field. So the first name, validate it, capitalize it, all that kind of stuff. Last name, validate it. Dates, costs. The only thing you shouldn't have to validate are the icons, because if you make an appropriate method for selecting an icon, there shouldn't be any way to pick something that's not on the list. So 1 point per field that you validate. And also make sure that you don't save, if you're going to do this, make sure you don't save any changes if there's any errors on this form. So it's kind of like that all fields okay or whatever we called it last year. Second activity screen is the one that deals with all the errors. There's not going to be any errors in your list view. Most of you are not ready for this yet, so if you have your questions, throw them at me later. And no, I don't have an evaluation sheet for it. I just dreamed this up this morning, so don't hold your breath. All right. Today what I want to talk about is how to create a multi-activity project. If you know how to start one activity from one, then you can add a third, a fourth, a fifth, and go jumping around all over the place. I'm going to show you how to do that, and then also how to communicate data between those activities, because you need to share some data. Which item on the list was clicked? Send that to the second screen. And the second screen manipulates that, and maybe the second screen gets some additional information, sends it back to the first screen. How do we get those two screens to communicate? There's two ways to do that. One I'm not going to talk about today, I might see how it goes, maybe talk about it next week, is to create a static class. Pretty sure we did this in Programming Logic Intermediate, where we create a class that is static, that inside of it has your list. So that the list doesn't change, and that class is shared amongst the two activities. And there's a list class. I think we did something similar to that in Programming Logic. Either that or I'm thinking of a different class. We didn't use that technique. I don't remember where it was. But that's one way to do it. The other way is you use bundles. We talked about bundles when we were saving states a couple of units ago, when we were saving the state, which image is on the screen, which text is on the screen, is it zoomed, is it not? That same kind of a bundle of information can also be created for multi-screen applications. So we can send a bundle from one screen to another and then a different bundle sent back. So that's what we're going to learn how to do today. And I'm going to fiddle around a little bit with that static class to see if I can come up with it. If it will, maybe I'll show you an example next week as an alternative solution to the project in Unit 8. All of our activities so far have had all of our projects so far have had single activities, single screens. An activity is not necessarily a screen. I think in that chapter 33 project that I'm asking you to do, you're going to create an activity that is not really a project. It's not a standalone run by itself product. But most of the ones we've been looking at, an activity is a screen. We go from one screen to another. It's the easiest way to think about it. It's not 100% accurate, but it's pretty close. We want to be able to switch back and forth between them, and if possible, we want to share data between them. And finally, I'm also going to show you how you can actually launch one of your device's built-in activities. We'll do the browser, we'll do the map. I don't have an example for contacts, but it is possible for us to say, from my application, launch the browser application and show me a web page. From my application, launch Google Maps and take me to this page, or take me to this
address.
Pardon me?
Address.
Address, okay. Location on a map, XY coordinates. They're not, what are they? They're longitudes and latitudes. That's what I was looking for. You shouldn't have me on class on Mondays. My brain doesn't really kick in 100% till like Tuesday. Of course, it's probably because I'm in this class that it kicks in on Tuesday. All right, so we've already opened the courses and lists project on the on OneDrive. There's a starter under Unit 8. I think I'm still there. Yep, this is the one that I opened. Downloaded that and opened it, and when you unzip that, it comes up as the course credits starter folder. Okay, but the project itself is just called course credits. It's really not much to it. If we look at the resources, it's simply at this point is very similar to what we had in Unit 7, which is simply a, please, all right, I'll show you the running ones quicker. A title across the top that I'm not going to do anything with, a text view, and then a list view. And as I click things in the list view right now, I get a toast message saying you clicked it. I've just got placeholders in my code. So I've already filled this. There's nothing new there. I've already created an array adapter, just a generic one. I didn't use a custom one for this one. And I put a bunch of courses in here. And what I want now is to transfer whatever I click here to a second screen. Display it, whatever. And then have that second screen return to this screen how many credits the selected course is worth. So we're going to have to put some logic in that other screen. I'm not going to make it terribly complicated. All right, but the point is, how do we transfer information back and forth between these two screens? And how do I switch from this screen to the next? And how do I get back? So that's our goal for the day. That's where we're going. Thought I changed the theme. Guess not. Okay. So back to the notes. These notes were updated last night. Wasn't a whole lot of change to them. This hasn't changed much. It was good to see. It's very similar to what you're learning. Again, it'll be I think, very well reinforced by those chapters in the book. So I've run it. We've seen the list of courses. We could look at the code, but there's really nothing magical in there that you haven't seen before. Now what we want to do is create our second screen. Second screen is actually an activity. We have to create it and then lay it out. What do we want on it? I'll call it my course details screen. And then we have to add a text view and a button. Again, I'm keeping this simple as a demonstration. You'll get to do something a little more complicated when you do your homework assignment. That's the way it should be, right? I show you the simple stuff and you do the hard stuff instead of the other way around. So what do we need to do? We need to, first of all, create a new blank activity. And this is only slightly tricky. You need to make sure that you have your Java folder open and then select your project, right-click it, and create a new activity. This is very similar to the activities we created at the beginning. Notice we have all those choices. We're still going to use a blank activity. Get a nice little dialog, says that's nice. What do you want to call this? Let's change it from main to details. And for the title, I think I'm going to say just course details. And the one thing, the book made me crazy because they said, okay, do all this stuff, fill it in. And I'm going, okay, that's good. I got the name, clicked finish, and it said, and don't forget. So like Indiana Jones all over again on the backside. And take away to whatever for the, yeah. Don't forget to make sure that this is unchecked. There can only be one launcher, and our main activity is the one that launches. It's like the main form in Visual Studio. It can only be one. So make sure that's unchecked. In this case, it's already unchecked. At this point, you could click Finish, but there is one other option, and whether you choose to implement it or not is up to you. And that's to designate the hierarchical parent. Who launches this? Sometimes you can't because you don't know necessarily where you're coming back from. There could be 3 different ways to get to this use case. There, we'll talk systems for a while, right? There might be different ways to get to this activity, to this use case. And if there are, then setting the hierarchical parent doesn't make any sense. In our case, it does because there is only one form. Notice there's nothing listed here. There's only one activity that we can go back to, and that's the main one. And so since it makes sense, it's not a bad thing to use this, but it does have, it brings in some interesting little twists that we have to be careful of. Click on Finish. And now inside here, you'll have 2 activities. We've had multiple things inside of our class before, or inside of our project before, but it's always been different classes. Now we actually have 2 different activities. I strongly recommend that you include the word activity in any activities that you might get. And since this is a new one, I'm not going to mess with it. I could go through and make all the changes to get rid of my little email icon here. I'm just going to leave it, because this activity is going to be very simple. According to my notes, we want to add a text view to the top. So I'm going to create a medium text widget up here, and I'm going to center it. I'm going to double click it. Do I want 2 more? Yeah, let's do 2 of them. I'm going to slide this one over a little bit. And I'm going to add a second one. And I'm going to, in here, change its text and say selected course. Maybe. What's happened to me yesterday? Selected course, colon. So it's just my label. And then this one, I'm going to park it right up against that one. And this one, I'm going to wipe out its text. Or maybe just in parentheses, put the word course. That's not going to stay. When I run my program, it's going to wipe that out. But I do want to give this an ID, so I'll call this text view course. One of the things I've discovered is that when you create projects with multiple views and you get your IntelliSense help, it gives you text views from anywhere. Doesn't seem to be smart enough to know that I'm messing around in my details view. I only want to see the objects that are in my details view. Doesn't seem to be quite that smart. I also want a button. Just center that up and down. And we'll just make this an OK button. So again, a very simple app. What I want to happen is when I click on something in the list view, it sends that information to this activity. This activity displays a selected course and just sits there. When the user's done with that exciting screen, they click on the OK button, and we not only return to the original form, but we send information about the number of credits back to that form. So then that main form will display that information at the top. Up here, credits for course right now. There's a question mark there. I want to replace that question mark when I come back. That should show you all the skills you need to send data to the new form and then to send data back. So nothing new, we just laid out some stuff here. One of the things to take a quick look at is because we added a new activity using the Android Studio, the manifest file has changed. And it now has one activity, there's our main one, and another one that has all that stuff in there for the second activity. So that happens automatically because we're doing the studio thing. I'd seen 2 years ago, I took out a big chunk of notes. We had to type that in there. Just use a skeleton kind of like this one and then tweak it. So that happened automatically. You'll see the same thing when you do the lab, chapter lab. Nothing in there we need to change at this point. The only time you'll change it, I think you'll learn in chapter 33 how to change that so that things work well together. Now, we need to start communicating. So I'm going to switch to the main activity, collapse a bunch of stuff. Notice I used my standard fill array link widgets stuff. I'm going to collapse this so that I can focus on my on-click listener. Didn't do a very good job of folding. What did I do? That's better. So here's my on-click listener. Remember, I don't know if I got it into the recording last time or not, but we discovered that an on-selected is different than on-click, and in most situations we want an on-click. So I've been using an on-click listener for my list view, and that's all wired together using link widgets. Shouldn't be anything exciting in there when you look at it. I will mention also, I should have added it to the extra credit, that in the past what we've done with these arrays is sorted them, added new ones. The app that I'm having you do in Unit 8 does not allow you to add records. It simply allows you to edit existing ones. What if I want to add somebody to my Christmas list? I forgot Sherry, so I've got to get her in there. Well, you're going to have to go modify the code the way it is right now. I will probably modify the assignment to give you even more extra credit for adding a menu item that says sort, that sorts your array in a method of your choice. Another one that allows you to add. What if you want to delete a record? It'd be nice to have menu items to do that. It's a little beyond, is it necessary? For a real app, yeah, ultimately it would be. But for the time that we have left in class, I'm not too worried about that. But for those of you who are bored by this class, we can add it as extra. I'll add it as extra credit. So anyways, back down here right now I have a toast, but I don't want a toast. Just in case, I'll comment it out. I knew it. Okay. In order to send information from one activity to another, you have to define what's called an intent. Where the name come from, I don't know, but it's basically you intend to launch a new activity. The intent contains information about which activity you want to launch, and it also contains the bundle of additional information that you might want to send to that other activity. I believe this is all fairly well described in my notes. And we'll see this arrow. We can't see it yet because we have no way to get to that second activity. This arrow shows up because we click that hierarchical parent. It's not spelled right, is it? Oh well. So this arrow will show up that allows us to go back to the parent. We'll talk about that when we get there. All right, to transfer control, we have to define an intent, tell it where it's coming from and who we're going to. Almost always come from this current activity, and then launch a second activity. And notice you must include the dot class. Syntax, that's all I can say. And then you simply start the other activity. So let's start with that. It's so nice to have my recording of the second screen available again. I discovered that last week. It's finally available in Screencast-O-Matic. I'll give them credit. I gave them a tip on that about a year and a half ago, and they caught up with me. All right, so in here I want to define an intent. I've seen what you call it, doesn't matter. This is just an object, so let's keep it real simple. Call it I. And it's going to be a new intent that is linked to this existing activity and goes to our details activity.class. And then when you're ready, you simply start an activity that is defined by our intent. That's it. So that's the define a form in Visual Studio and start it. That's what this is. This should work. We should now be able to click on anything in the list and launch the second form so we can at least take a look at it. So I'm going to run this and hope it doesn't take too long. Time it sometime, how much time we spend in the recordings waiting for programs to launch. All right, so here we are, and we just coded the on-click event to define an intent and go back. And so there we are. We made it. Note the arrow up here. And unfortunately, what I can't get to is the arrows down below here now. Don't know if I can drag this up the screen. I can't shrink it. There's not much I can do. On yours, can you see the normal control buttons down here? If I put it over on the other screen, I can see them. I can't think about a way to get that to go up. I don't think I can manage the screen and shift it up. Oh well. So those buttons. What's the difference between this button and the little arrow at the bottom that goes back? This one sends you back, and I believe it was in my notes because I can't remember which one is which. So note the activity now includes a little arrow in the upper left-hand corner that allows the user to return the main activity. Using this button causes the main activity to recreate. Uh-oh. It causes the main activity to go through on create. If it goes through on create, what happens to your list? it gets recreated. And this is bothering me, right? This is what I'm worried about with your Project 8, because I haven't written it. I just dreamed it up this morning. This is what I'm worried about in Project 8. What I'm afraid of is we'll launch it. We'll change programming logic beginning to programming logic beg. We'll save it. It'll come back and change the list. But then when I click on something else, edit that, and come back, it's going to redefine my list and then change it. That's what I'm afraid of. If that happens, we may have to just deal with it and hope we can resolve that in Unit 9 so that whenever we launch the other page, save the list real quick so we don't lose what happened before. So this fact here scares me a little bit because every time I go through on create, I redefine my array, right? Do all my links and fill the array again from its original values. I'm not real thrilled about that right now. That worries me a little bit. If you use the little arrow down the bottom of the screen that I can't see in my recording now, if you use that arrow, it just goes back and doesn't relaunch it. John?
If mine didn't come with that first arrow in the upper left-hand corner.
Then you're in really good shape. The reason the arrow's not there is you forgot to check the hierarchical parent in that create the activity screen, probably. That's the only reason I can think of, because this is a fairly new version. I haven't installed all the latest, greatest versions of the software. But if you don't check hierarchical parent, that means there isn't one and the arrow won't show up. So you might have forgot to set that when I was going through. Okay. What does my OK button do? Not much. But right now, the next step, so this is, again, programming in pieces. I've been teaching you this for way too many months now. Build little pieces, make progress. When you get stuck at one of these, I know how hard it is to just stop and wait for me to answer your emails 2 days later and say, here's your problem. And by the way, I have to tell you about a problem that Harold had. And he was in here on Saturday, and he and I looked at it for, Karen, what was it, hour and a half? Could not find, tried everything we could come up with. I just said, send it to me. I went home and saw it right away. It's just that he had started me where he thought the problem was, and I did not. What he forgot to do is set up a second listener for his animations. His animations left were working perfectly. The animations right were not working. We set breakpoints, and it never launched the end animation. Never launched the end animation because he never set an end. He never set a listener for the right fling, so it wasn't listening for the end of the animation. And it never executed that code. And I'm lucky I stumbled on it because we set really intelligent breakpoints and could not figure out why it wasn't doing that. I even went to the web and said, why isn't my end animation running? And there were 80 gazillion examples, and none of them were right, at least not in this case. Most of them were dated 2010, which first of all makes me suspicious because the world in 2010 Android is a whole lot different than it is today. But sometimes you never know. So that's why you build programs in pieces, so you can see this isn't working. This isn't working. Why isn't this working? And if you can't figure it out, send it to me. Give it a try. Try to figure it out on your own, because I promise you, Karen has not tried this yet. But when you go to Skyward and you send me questions from Skyward, I don't know what's going on here. First of all, you can't send me the code. They'll shoot you. It's all proprietary stuff. And second, what do I know about that stuff? I told you, when you graduate, in about 6 months, you're going to be way smarter than me. You have to solve your own problems, so start getting used to them. Doesn't mean I won't help you. At Skyward, what do you do, Karen, when you can't figure it out? Call your mentor, the person next door, somebody, get somebody else's brain looking at it, the team leader, whatever, and get them looking at it, because they'll probably do the same thing that I do. And they'll say, is this what you want? And you go, oh, man, and off you go. You just get too close to your code sometimes. But as you're building it, build it in pieces. So our next step, okay, is to, did I try that arrow? That's not good. There it goes. It's a little slow. And I can't click the arrow underneath. They do exactly the same thing. They come back to here. Okay. But one of them launches on create, that arrow that was up here. The other does not. So we have to write code that deals with both of those if we really want to do this right. Because how do we know which one the user is going to click on? But whether we really want to do this right this semester or not is a different question. All right, so our next step is how do I send some data in between? Same way that we did it with our save state bundle. The intent itself has a bundle embedded inside it. It has a bundle. All we have to do is put extra stuff into our intent. And you don't even have to designate what kind of extra stuff. You just said put it in there, and then when we extract it, it better be the right type. So in this case, I want to transfer my program name. So I think that's what I want to do. So I'm back down here again, and before I start the activity, I want to put some extra stuff into my intent. I'm first going to define a string called selected and make that equal to the big ugly stuff that we were fighting with before. Remember, the view contains the information that I want, but it's a generic view. I have to convert it to a text view first. Or I could use the position. I think I showed you both techniques last time. There's two different ways to get the information on what was clicked. So I think I'm going to use the position, and I'm going to use my course, is it courses? There we go. .get, whatever's in position, and I think that's already a string. It's not complaining. So that should be okay. If that doesn't work, I'll add a toString to the end. But this says go back to my original array and use this position because he clicked in position 2, get me the corresponding name. And since this is an array of strings, that's pretty straightforward. Yours is going to be an array of classes. A little more complicated, but not much. Get that, and then I want to add that information. I want to put extra information into my intent. Now remember, with bundles, same thing here. We have to provide two pieces of information. The key, and that's a really stupid name for the key. So let's do CRS name. Whatever it is, as long as we know what it is on the other intent, doesn't matter what it is. And then the data that we want to send. That's it. So this intent is built upon the bundle class that we've seen before. It has a bundle embedded inside it. And you can put all kinds of extra information inside of that bundle. Another extra credit I'm thinking about for your Unit 8 assignment is, right now you're all going, cool, I'm going to take that record for, let's say it's a birthday present. I'm going to take the first name, I'm going to put it in the extras, take the last name, and put it in the extras. I'm going to take the birth date and put it in the extras, and put the icon and put it in the extras. That'll work. I'll betcha there's a way to put the entire object inside the extra. I haven't found it yet. That's why it's extra credit. Give you a point for working 8 hours to figure it out, and I don't know how to do it. I haven't found it yet, but I'll bet you there's got to be a way to do that. And it makes me think of the holder. Remember the object that we created for a holder, that for those custom rows, and we sent all kinds of stuff in there at once and then pulled it right back out again using tags. I don't think that's quite the right way, but I'm sure there's a way. And don't go looking it up now and telling me in the middle and ruining my extra credit, because if you tell me now, I will make it required. I should keep you quiet. All right. So this is all I want for this example, but again, you can put as many things inside that intent object as you want. This doesn't help me much. I now need to, on the detail side, pull that back out again. So there's the bundle. Okay, and so far everything's good. Now the second activity needs to retrieve that. Where would it retrieve it? In onCreate. And it gets an intent. I've been saying the intent launches the activity. Okay, maybe it does, but it kind of inserts itself into that activity. In onCreate or anywhere, you can say get the intent that caused this to happen. What about the main activity? Does it have an intent? Yep. It was created automatically. That's why it's a launcher. The intent was automatically created. It has one, but it doesn't ever have anything in it. So on the detail side, we need to define an intent and then get the string extra called message out of that intent, save it someplace, and then do whatever we want with it. This is just another example where I'm getting an integer extra, and I haven't tested this, but I think it's right. So now we want to get that string extra. I'm going to put my little cheat notes on the other page here, and now we're going to shift to the details. And just like in Visual Studio, the more forms and the more objects and the more classes you have, the tougher it is to keep track of where everything goes. I'm now in the details on Create, and it's full of a bunch of stuff because I never got rid of my floating action bar. So I'm just going to go below that. And I could do something like get the sent data. I'm going to create a method just so I can separate it out here. Public void get the sent data. Could I do it right inside here? Sure. But again, many of you are thinking I'm going to send 4 or 5 pieces of information, of extra information. Then you got to do all that non-create. Non-create's already cluttered with a bunch of junk. And I'm not a big fan of cluttering on create any more than I was of cluttering form load. So inside here, I need to define an intent. I can still call it I, and it's equal to not a new one, but get the one that already exists, and there must be one, because that's how we got here. Uh-oh. Oh, there's no intent in the front here. There. There must be an intent because we're in the second activity. We're the programmers. We know there's an intent because we know that this never launches itself. So there has to be one. Then inside there's going to be a string that we're going to suck out. Let's call it CRS name because that's what we did for the key that had. I'm not even going to do it. I'm just going to go there. They don't have to be related in any way, but of course, if they all have the same names, it's a little easier to keep it straight. And that's going to be equal to my I get string extra. And then you simply say which one, and its course name. If you spell that wrong, your program crashes on that line, and you could try to figure out where that came from. This is the same key that I used over here. I'll be back to that in just a second. So when I put it, I said it's going to be called CRS name. This was my name. You can call it whatever I want. But when I go get it, I have to refer to it by the same name. That's one way. My notes show you a second way that is demonstrated also in the lab that you're doing. Well, I'll tell you what, let's first make sure that works. What do I want to do with that? I just want to stuff it into that label that's up at the top. And I think I called that TV something, and I haven't linked to it, so I'm going to have to create a text view here. And we'll just do TV equals find. Notice all of them there? Those are all the TVs across all of the applications. Make sure you name stuff properly so that you can tell one from another. What's your problem? Oh. I was just about to say this should be so brainless now that you can do them in your sleep and then forget to transfer to typecast it. So there's my TV, and now simply set its text equal to CRS. So now whatever I pick on the first screen should be transferred to the second screen and displayed in the text view. All that happening in course load, so it happens pretty quickly. Again, a test. All right, let's pick something weird here like web data management. And there we go. So now I can click this and I can test it until I'm sick of it. Seems to be working. What about the OK button? Doesn't matter. Now I can't get to that little button down below there. I'm trying to figure out how to do that. I don't know how to get there. Oh, I can just slide it over to the other screen.
Or rotate.
Or I could, that's interesting. What would this say when I rotate it? Command F12, right? Or the command function F12? Wasn't it F12 to rotate? Oh no, it's control. There we go. Okay, so there's that button now, and I can go back. What's the difference? Well, one of the things I did, and you'll have to trust me on this one, is in onload, I changed this. Question mark to the word Volker. I did it in onload. No, I did it in onClick. In here. Changed this to Volker. So when I left, that question mark now has got a Volker in it. And when I went back using this, it went back to the question mark. I went back using this, it was still there. So it demonstrated that my onload was not executing when I did this one. Good idea, Ring. That I can see. Okay. So now what else do we need? Now we need to start sending information back in the other direction. And I think we can finish this. So I'm going to keep the recording going, especially since we started a little late. Oh, I was going to show you a separate way, second way to do this. It's in my notes. This extras bundle has grown over time, so there's a number of different ways to do it. We can define a bundle class called extras, and that's equal to the i.getAll of the extras. And then you can say string CRS is equal to extras.getString. Again with the key. So not a whole lot easier, actually a little harder, because you have to define the extra bundle. But if you're getting 5 or 6 things, you define the bundle once, and then you get extras, get string, get int, get string, get double, get date, get whatever. So that's a second way to do it. I don't care which way I use. Should still work. Quick test. Go. It still has the name. All right. Next thing we want to know is, all right, how do I send information back? Well, the first problem, if you're going to send information back, you have to start the activity in a different way. The activity that we're using with just the word start activity and the intent assumes that you're using the arrow or some other way, but you're not sending any data back. If you want data to come back from the second activity back to the first, you have to say start activity for result. If you say start activity for result, then there's the potential for the information to come back. So the first thing we need to do is go back to the main activity. Instead of starting an activity, we have to start an activity for result. And unfortunately, it's not that simple, because there's only 2 ways to do this, and neither one of them simply have an intent inside there. You also have to provide a, what do they call it, a return code. Second parameter Same code. So it's some kind of return code. Who started this? It is possible in really advanced applications to have two versions of the second screen open from two different places somehow. I don't know how you would do that without closing it, but you can. All right. And this is just a code that when the second activity responds, it automatically sends that code back. The application you're doing out of the book makes it constant, puts a number 5 in there. Why 5? I have no idea. And they say the same thing. They don't know. It's just a number. So why not use 1? Why not use 0? It doesn't matter. I just stick the number 1 in there. Because I've never had apps where I've got 2, 3, 4, 5 screens open at the same time. I want to know who to go back to. But it's kind of a who sent me this message so I know which activity to go back to when we finish on the other side. So over here, we're going to have to retrieve that somehow. We'll save that. Now let's follow through. This is going to start the activity for result. And then when we go over here, we now need some way to get back. And I already have a button, so I'm going to define a button up here. And I think in form load, I'm going to link it just to do it.
BT okay, not BTM okay.
And immediately said it's on click listener. And I could have, remember, we could have defined it in the properties, but this works just about as good for me. Wait for the red. There we go. Make an on click listener that way. And now down here, when the user clicks on OK, this is when I send my data back. Now what do I want to send back, and to who and how? To send it back, in my notes, we need to call a method called finish. Finish is the predefined method for this intent or this activity finishing its tasks and returning back to wherever it came from. So we're going to call finish, and then we're going to define it. We're going to override it. So in here, I'm just going to say finish. And then right underneath it, I'm going to override the finish method. There is one already. We're going to define our own as a public void finish. And the part we always have to remember, this is one of those that's built in, is we want to do the super finish. To do what would normally be done. If you skip this, the other screen may not go away. Who knows what leftover junk you get. The super finish is what does a finish if you don't give it any special instructions. Now, once again, we either build a bundle and we're going to build an intent. I have an intent to go back to the other screen. So I'm going to define a new intent. And here, everything I've seen calls it data for no particular reason except that we're going to send data. You can call it whatever you want. And it's going to be a new intent. And then in the data, we put extras. We can put it whatever we want. For right now, let's just send a 3 for test purposes. Oh, gotta give it a name first. Results 3. Now this will return 3 for every single course, but we can then tweak this, and maybe after the break we'll tweak it. But then we set the result of this activity. with, in our case, two pieces. Notice there's two ways to call this, with just a return code or with a return code and some data. Now this return code they're talking about here is not that one. That happens automatically. That one is sent to this activity. That activity receives it, remembers it, and automatically sends it back. We don't even have to look at it. It's just a link that's on the main side that's automatically handled by the second screen. The return code here is like an OK or cancel. Remember all the different buttons and what they do in Visual Studio. Probably not that far yet in HTML, where you've got different buttons sending different things back. The return code is just, did they click OK? Did they click cancel? What did they do? And you can send different pieces of information back, and those are stored in the activity class. And we can say result canceled, result OK, result bunch of other stuff. OK and cancel are pretty common. So that's the first thing we want to provide. And then in our case, we do want to send the data back. And then super finish. So this is the link on the second screen. We have to redefine finish. What do we want to do on finish? We don't just want to go back. We want to go back and send some data on the way. And no, there is no way that you can tuck this up in here, because those two methods don't communicate with each other. Whenever it's appropriate, on click in this case, do the finish, call the finish method, and then whip all your code in there. So now we've said, call that method, call that second activity, get it started. Send some data back. Now we got to retrieve it on the other side. So that's the last step. In the main activity, we need to override another method, on activity result. The on activity result is a method that automatically fires whenever we come back. It's kind of like those gesture methods. Automatically fires whenever we come back from another activity that sends us result stuff. So again, shifting to the main activity, I'm going to right click in here and I'm going to generate, and I'm going to override methods. No. I think I have to be inside there when I do that. Generate. There we go. Override methods. And I want to find the on activity. Still can't see it. Result. We just start typing and start searching for you. There's the on activity result. And in this case, you can delete the super, because we don't need to handle what it would do otherwise, which is for the most part nothing. So you can delete that one. Most code that I see says something like, first of all, make sure that we got it back from who we expected. That's this request code. Make sure they sent back an OK. And then make sure there's some data. If all of those are true, then we can process. If any of those is screwed up, then something went wrong. And you could write each one separately. Or I'm going to try this. If the request code double equals 1, and the result code double equals activity dot result OK, and my data is not equal to null. Why would it be? I have no idea. Then I'm going to process. And I hope this works. I didn't try this last night. I split those two if statements up. This should be okay. You could split up the three if statements and say, I got a message back from somebody I didn't expect. Or I didn't get an okay. I don't know what happened, but I didn't. You could put error messages on the screen or something for each different case. All I'm trying to do here is say, deal with it. And now what do I expect? I expect an integer to come out. So I'm going to create an integer called credits, and I could do integer, but I'll stick with int for right now. Credits. And that's going to be equal to my data get extras. Is it get string? Yep, just get string. Did I type that wrong in my notes? Oh, get extras first. Get the extras, all of them. And from there you get, you're right, it's not a string, it's an integer, thank you. Int, and which int? The one for, what did I call it, credits? When I sent it back, did I give it a key? Should have. Results, good thing I looked. And now I have that. And I can display it in that text view for credits, so I better create that text view. Should have done it a long time ago, or maybe I did. I think this is the one where I listed everything. Text view is TV. TV.setText. And I'm just going to do this thing with credits. So this said, get me the thing labeled results, put it in a variable called credits, and then just take that and tack it on. Retrieving it as an integer might not have been necessary, except I think I wrote it. Did I write it as an integer? No, I just wrote it, period. I didn't say what it was when I put it out. But it is an integer, so it should track. So now it should display the 3. And my recording is getting a little long, but that's okay. And now when I click on OK, I expect it to go back and put a 3 at the top. And it did. Doesn't matter who I click on, I'm going to get a 3. Now if I go back this way, it's still going to show a 3 because it's probably there. No, it will not. Because this should be interesting, this should reload my form. Question marks back. This would take me back, it would still have the 3, but it would not have analyzed the latest one. So my last step is I want to define the credits a little bit differently. So I'm going back to my details view, and instead of sending it a 3, I want to send it the appropriate number of credits. Now I'm not going to get too carried away here. I'm going to define a variable that is an integer called credits that is equal to get credits. Doesn't exist yet, will in a second, and then just transfer that credits over. This looks pretty stupid, but it'll work. Now I'm going to write a method that figures out is it a 3-credit class, a 4-credit class, or a 2-credit class. It's a public method that returns an integer called getCredits. I need what's in the text view. I should probably define this someplace else, but I think to make life easier, I'm just going to steal it. This is why you define them up above, link them once, and be done with it. You can keep referring to your text view instead of redefining it all over the place. But since I didn't do that, I'll just put it in here. So now I have my TV again. This is the TV that has the course name in it. It's coming from TV course. So this is the course that when I loaded came from the other screen. Now I need to use it. I'm going to create a string called CRS name, and that's going to be equal to the TV.getText. And this is where I need to do the toString. My curly bracket's giving an error because I have not returned an integer yet. Now I'm going to use a switch statement to take a look at that course name. when the course name is programming logic, and unfortunately there's no good way around this, beginning, or it's programming logic intermediate, then credits. Didn't I define a variable called credits? Not yet. Need one in here. Then the credits is equal to 4. Break. When it's relational database RDD design, or it's IT customer support, and I should double check. I think these are right because I did it yesterday. Those may be the right names of the course. Doesn't mean that's what I put in the array. These have to match what's in the array. If it's either one of those, then the credits is equal to 2. Break. Else credits equals 3. So that's just my little routine. Now, realistically, I should have a database of these, right? And every object should have the course name and the program that it's used in and the number of credits, number of hours it meets per week, and on and on and on and on. I don't have that here, so I'm just making something up real quick. And now when I click on different courses, I should get different credits. Okay, so one of these should get me 4 credits. Cool. 3 credits. Cool. Sorry. And where's one of those 2 credit guys? No. Still thinking. Relational database development, not design. Let's try this one. There we go. Okay, so again, it's not design, it's development, which is right, because the course is not just about design. And so that's what's wrong here. But the app seems to be working the way I want it to. Transferring information back and forth between 2 screens. If you're only transferring it in one direction, you can do an activity start. If you want information coming back, you need to use activity start for result, and that means you then have to have a method to catch that on the back end when it comes back, and you have to have a method on the other side. And most of the time, at least in my apps, that's what I want. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll learn how to launch activities using other software that's already built into the device.
I have a question. So when you